So we've got two different types of loops. We got the sentinel loop and we got the counted loop. In both of those two different types of loops, what we do is before the while loop, we have something, some variable that on its condition is going to control that loop. There are other ways of doing it, but the way that we've been doing these loops is we've been doing that. We've been saying, okay, we're going to use a variable to control this loop. And so we set the variable immediately before the while loop. And then the last statement in the while loop, we reset that variable. If you do it that way, you'll have a lot less trouble with your while loops. And so what I mean is, for example, for a counted loop, before you set the loop, count equals 0 before the loop. Last statement in the loop, count equals count plus 1. That should be the last statement in the loop. If you're going to use a sentinel loop, last statement before the loop, get the variable, input the variable. Last statement inside the loop, input the variable. If you don't do that, your program will look like it's working. But if you got totals, if you're doing averages, things like that, you might end up with wrong numbers because you might end up adding a sentinel value to a total and then using that as a basis of your average, and that would be a wrong number. So if you follow that little guide that I've just given you there, you'll be a lot better off. All right, so let's look at the problems that we've got today in assignment 5. Now it does say in assignment 5 that you got to do a flow chart or pseudocode. Well, a pseudocode looks, I'm not going to do pseudocode because it looks a lot like Python. I mean, I don't think it's very hard. So it's not the same as Python, because you got curly braces and all these kind of things. But I think it's better that you look at the flow chart. So we got to do two things. We have to do a Python file and we have to do a flow chart. So the first problem, the idea here is we know that we're going to do this 10 times. We know we're going to do it 10 times. So I think that kind of tells you what kind of loop we're going to do, right? What kind of loop would we do? Got two different types that we've been working with. There are others, but we're only using while loops. The two different types are sentinel loop and counted loop. This one will be a counted loop because we know how many times we're going to do it before we do it. So we're going to do a counted loop. That means we have to set the counter to 0. And that means before we go into the loop. And then last thing inside the loop is we've got to reset that counter. And we reset it upwards by 1. Okay, so we got 10 items. We know we're going to do exactly 10 items. And then the thing is, if we look at this one, it says also that we're going to calculate the average. Now you've seen a few averages by now, so I hope that that's making sense to you. What we do every time we do an average, it's calculated simply, which is the total divided by the count. The total divided by the count. So there's two variables that we need to use for every average calculation. Now, the other thing that I hope that I've impressed on your minds with this is there's 3 parts to a while statement when we're doing an average calculation. We have something that we do before the while, and that's where we initialize our variables. That is, we set the count to 0, and we set the total to 0. That's before the while. Inside the while, we update our variables. So that's where we increment the count. Count equals count plus 1, and that's where we increment the total. Total equals total plus, in this case, sale. That's happening inside the loop. Then after the loop, that's where we calculate the average. Don't do calculating the average inside the loop or before the loop or anything like that. Do it after the loop is finished. We go and calculate the average and print it out. So it's a pretty straightforward problem. I hope we get it right. I think I might have mentioned to you that, when was this? 1976 or 77. The first computer program I ever wrote was calculate the average of 10 numbers. So I kind of memorized this like 50 years ago. So yeah, it might be easier for me for that reason. All right, so the first thing that we always have to do in a flow chart is we need to do a sales. Mind you, the programming language that we used in 1977 was Fortran, and we wrote the program. We didn't have computer screens that we worked on. It was a computer that was in another city, and we had these cards that we drew little dots on. It'd take you 2 hours to do a little program that's got 10 lines of code in it. Yeah, that was at the end of that, I was glad I was studying chemistry and not computing. But here I am doing computing. So we start with sales. Then the next thing that we do is we start what? So we got before the while loop, during the while loop, and after the while loop. What do we have to do before the while loop? I just told you a minute ago. We need to set the count to 0 and set the total to 0. We have to set up our initial value. So I'm going to do that. Actually, I'm going to do that with both of them the same, right? Because this is just initializing. So we'll say that the total is equal to 0. Total takes a value of 0. And I'm going to put in the same box because, and the count is equal to 0. That's our initialization that we always do with an averaging program. And the cool thing about this is the count is actually controlling the loop. So that means that we can kind of start our loop now, right? The loop is controlled by the count. So I'm going to do the loop. Now we use these diamonds. We can use them for an if, or we can use them for a while. We could use it for a for, but here we're going to use it for a while. So this is where we put our condition. So the condition will have something to do with the count. Can you help me? What do you think the condition will be? So we're going to say, we're going to do these things. The loop is going to run as long as something to do with the count is happening. The count will be, well, when do we stop? We stop when we get to 10. So as long as the count is less than 10, we'll keep going. Okay. So we're going to keep going as long as the count is less than 10. I'm taking the spaces out because we don't really have a lot of room to type a lot of stuff here. So what are we going to do while the count is less than 10? Well, we got a couple of things to do. This time I'll separate them out. So what we do is we need to read a value from the user, right? We got a sales value that we need to read. So actually, this is not going to be this kind of a shape, is it? This is going to be do it again. It's going to be an input. And so here we're going to input the sales amount. Which is, just get the sales. So we get the sales amount, and then we have to increment the total and increment the count. So I hope that's obvious what we're doing now. That what I'm trying to do by talking to you about it like this way is so that you can see what's happening. I hope you can see what's happening. It's not just me just up here drawing random boxes, right? So you see what's happening. We had to set these before the loop. Now we're inside the loop. We can tell we're inside the loop because we got our condition for the loop there. Inside the loop, we're going to get our value, and then we're going to update these totals. So let's go update the totals, or the total and the count. So the total is going to take the value. Total has to be updated to what? It's going to be updated to, what are we going to add to the total? The sales amount. Very good. I think you said the last one, so that's what I'll take as the sales amount. Now total is going to be equal to the total or plus sales amount. You can say sales amount or sales. So we're going to do that. And then we're going to increment the count. All right, so a minute ago, I told you that the loop for an average, we got to increment the total, we got to increment the count, and we use the count to control the loop. So the last statement in the loop is going to be incrementing the count. So that's the end. So what's next? That's the end of the loop. So we'll draw an arrow back to our decision, which is our while condition. We'll draw that arrow there. Now what I'm going to do is, that's a kind of an ugly arrow like that because it's crossing our boxes. So what I'll do is I'll change the arrow type, be a curve type. And I'll pull it out here so it's, yeah, but you can see now Anytime you see an arrow that's going backwards, that means you got a loop. So we see that this is a loop. Arrows going backwards. No, all the other arrows are going forward, right? So they're not loops, but that one's a loop. Now I'm going to put some text in here. So if we're going down this way, is that true or false? The count, if we're going to stay in the loop, that's because the condition of the loop is true. So I'm just going to say, well, that's what we do if we're true. So this is a condition. So it could be false. What do we do if it's false? Well, we go to, that's when we get out of the loop. Getting out of the loop. What do we do when the loop is finished in an average problem? We calculate the average. Calculate the average. So here we're going to say the average is going to be equal to the total divided by the count. And that's it. Oh, no, we have to print the average, right? Print the average. So better do that. You have another thing there, print the average. And last thing, that's the end, right? So I'm just going to get an arrow to the end. Now, you might have done this all in one, all in one. No, you couldn't. It has to come off that way. I suppose could have had an arrow come down this way, but this works. We see the start is up here and the end is down here. We go into the loop. We actually have to go into this loop. We're going to do it exactly 10 times. There's no choice really, right? Because we start out with the count is the count is 0. So that means we're going to go into the loop, doesn't it? It means we must go into loop. So this is going to happen. It's going to happen exactly 10 times because every time we go through this, the count gets incremented. Eventually the count's going to become 10. Then we're going to calculate our average. Then we're going to get out. Yes. I should have done that. Thanks. So it's better if you show where the true and the false are. So I should have done that. So that's good. Okay, you guys all right with that? Now let's turn this into a Python program. And I hope that you'll see that the Python program will exactly represent this. Yes, what's up?
For the assignment, we have to make the flowchart slide.
Yeah, have a look at the assignment here. It says, yes. That's why I'm showing you how to do it. Okay, sorry about that. So yeah, you do have to make the flow chart. I don't know, I didn't write the assignment. Don't blame me that you have to do flow charts, but you should be able to do flow charts by now, right?
Yeah, it's kind
of boring.
Yeah.
Oh, well, you know that you don't want to be an art student then. Okay, because you don't like drawing with computer packages.
Why do you think I'm in IT?
There you go. A lot of people in IT do drawings. Sorry. I think as you go through IT, there'll be less drawing to do, maybe more. It'll just be different kind of drawing. The drawings will be different. Instead of flow charts, you'll be doing data flow diagrams and stuff like that. It's all fun. Yeah, you're going to be doing a lot of drawing. But this is not drawing. I mean, they give us the images. We just have to put them in the right place. Okay, so what we want to do is we want to do this now. I think that this flow chart should make it very easy for us to make our Python code, because our Python code goes directly from the flow chart. That is, our first lines of code will be these, then we'll do that, and we'll do these, and we'll do those, and we'll be done. We can just follow the arrows. The arrows show what happens next. So it's very easy to take this flow chart and turn it into Python code. So let's do that. So we need a new file. I want to see what's going on here. So I want to make this kind of smaller. So we got it. Yeah. All right, I have to move it around as I go. So this is going to be called, probably should have my glasses on so I can see what I'm doing here.
No.
Yep.
You need to do the technical.
Yeah, the assignment, you need to do the Python code. Yep. Assignment 5, and this is, so you need to do Python code, and you see it's here, right? I'm not making this up, right? It says that you should do a flow chart, and then it says that you should do Python files. So assignment 5, which is about sales. So I'm just going to go straight from here to there. Total equals 0, count equals 0. I shouldn't say equals 0. I should say total takes the value of 0, or you could say total is assigned the value of 0. Then, because when we get to the next one, we're going to say while count is less than 0, or sorry, less than 10. Yeah. And then we put a colon, right? Now, everything after this colon that's indented is going to be these 3 statements here, right? Now we have to put these 3 statements inside the while. And then the statement that's after the while will have to be outdented. So that's why we put the colon there to get our indenting right. And then away we go. Input the sales amount. So sales is input. You guys are familiar with input, right? But the problem is you realize that as you're doing the input is a string, and sales needs to be a number. So we need to convert it from a number to a string. How do we do that? We do a thing called casting, which is we say what type of variable we want it to be and put the brackets around it. So that's why we put the int there. That means take that input, which is going to be a string, and turn it into an integer so that I can do some math with it. That's why we're doing the int there. So I hope that explains something that we've been doing for a while, but maybe we didn't know why. Now, I don't want to type all this stuff so I can see that it's right here. So I'm just going to take it from the assignment. Enter the sales amount. Copy that. And I'm going to put that as the text inside the input statement. Now, when I look at my program, actually, I see that that's not quite what I want, because it doesn't say sales amount 10 times. It says the amount for each time you go through there. So we need to have some variable which is going to tell us where we are. And the obvious one would be the count. So I'm going to remove the 1, I guess, and put a count there. So I'm just putting the 2 brackets there so that I can see I've got 2 strings here, string on the left, string on the right. I'm going to add them together. And in the middle, I'm going to put another string, which is going to be my count. Oops. So that will print that number 1, 2, 3, etc. As we go down. All right, so that's inputting the sales amount. The next thing we have to do is update the total. We can see that there. Yep. Total equal total plus sales, just like that. And then the next thing is to increment the count. Count takes the value of count plus 1. And that's the end of our loop. We see that's the end of our loop. So that means we're going to go and do the thing after the loop. The thing after the loop is calculating the average. So I'm outdenting to get in the same place. Calculate the average. Average takes the value of total divided by the count. And then we're going to print the average. And so when I do the print is going to be some kind of string. So I'm just going to do my print like that. Put the string in there. Well, what string? Well, I'm going to get it exactly as they've said. So I'm going to copy this string from there. Put it in here. Then I'm going to check it and see if it's going to work. Well, the problem is that the 10 items, you know what? I could get away with that, but oh yeah, just occurred to me, right? First time we go through the loop, count is going to be 0. We don't say the 0 item. So I'm going to put a +1 on that. Now here, we need to say that the number of items. We could use the count for that. I'm going to change that to the count. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to replace these two numbers that are in the print. This one I'm going to replace with count. This one I'm going to replace with average. Okay, so right, so just replace that with count. And count is a number, so I'm converting it to a string before I try and replace it. Same for average. So I'm going to take that number and replace it. Oops. So I put 2 quotes in, so I got 2 strings. Add the strings together with something in the middle, which is going to be the average. I did it. Okay, so I think that will work. I just want to review what we're doing in this program. So what we see, the while loop is a counted while loop. We know how many times we're going to do it before we start. That's why we decided to use a counted loop. So we set up the controlling variable. The variable that controls that y is the count. So we set it to its initial value before the loop. Last thing before the loop makes it easier to read our program. Then the last thing in the loop is we change that value. So, as I said, it makes it easier to read the while, and yeah, it makes it work. So let's run that and test it. I'm gonna have to save it, and I'll call it what is this? Problem 1, but it's a sales, yeah, sales average counted, because we're gonna do it a couple other different ways, right? Okay, so now we can check against our, so this looks the same as that. Well, it should, because I copied it straight from there, right? So the first one is 50, next one's 55, next one's 65, the next one's 75. The next one is 85, 95. Sales go up every day. That's nice. That's a nice business. Well, except for on day 8, it drops back down again. Maybe that's a weekend or something. All right, so we've got to 10. So, oh, did I miss one? Oh, 105. Yeah, okay. I missed one. Anyway, so we got to 5, and we get our average is 71.5. So that's working nicely. Easy code, I hope. Any explanation of that code needed? What about the flow chart? Any explanation of that needed? It's okay. We're good with the code in the flow chart. All right, so let's look at the next 2 problems. Problem 2 is we take this one. It's basically the same. I see people taking photos, so that's fine. We see it's basic. Problem 2 is basically the same, except the difference is we let the user decide how many items we're going to do beforehand. So instead of always having to do 10 items, the user can say, well, right now I've only got 5 things, or right now I've only got 3 things. And so they can do it. So it would actually be the same program. We're just going to update it a bit. So how would that look here, right? So we're going to let the user, instead of always counting 10 times, we get to let the user decide how many times. So that would mean that we would need to add another variable in here. And we could do that like this. Going to add another variable in there. And that would be how many times we're going to do it, right? When we look here, it says how many items. How many items were sold today? So we could call it whatever you want, call it items sold today, or how many, or count, not count. I'll call it N items or something. Because that's kind of, is that all right?
We're gonna send this one to a chart, right?
To where?
We're gonna send the last flow chart.
Yeah, we'll do all of them. You should save them all, right? I hope. I do the last one. I guess you're saying, do we have to draw all of those diagrams? That's what you're saying, right? I get it. Which is your way of saying you don't want to draw all those diagrams. Well, you can take the first diagram, do a screenshot of it, and then just add like I have, right? So that comes straight. This shouldn't be called sales. That should be called start. Anyway, so there we go. So need to have a join. Oh, this should say get items, right? That's the name of it. Yeah. Get items. Yeah. So or input or yeah. Sorry, I don't have a standardized way that I use of getting things. Get items, read items, input items, something like that, right? So now we're not going to do this 10 times. We're going to do it how many times? However many times the boss tells us, right? The boss is the user here. Users can say we can do it 5 times instead of 10 times. So we let them control it. So this 10 has to go away and be changed into something else. What would we change it into? The 10 is going to become, the count is going to continue as long as we're less than n items. So n items is going to be, the count still controls the program, the while loop, but we're going to do the count not until 10. We're going to do it as many times as the user asked us to do. So this is not a hard program, not much of a change. We only have to change 2 lines of code to make this happen, right? So from what we had before, we just add one more line up there, which is to get a new top end of our loop. And then we have to change the condition in the loop so that the condition reflects our new top end in the loop. So that's all, that's it. So here's our change. I'm going to save this as that different file, right? So save as. So that was average counted. This is average counted. I'll just call this problem 2 to separate it from it.
One Python, like send this one first or last one?
You only want to do one Python?
Like just send the last one.
I think you're supposed to do all 3.
Because like to do the last one, we have
Just have to save them separately, like I'm doing here. See, I save one, and then I do a save as. You don't have to write it all again. You just have to make the changes. Sorry, Shahid. I know you don't want to. I can tell. All right, so this one is going to be our n items, right? N items, and here we get the user input. So that's going to be kind of like how we did it here. Same idea. There's a lot of things that you can do to save yourself a lot of work typing. You can do a lot of copying and pasting, and you can do a lot of taking the old stuff. And so I'm not going to type all this. We can copy and paste. There's a lot of stuff you can copy and paste. So I'm going to copy that and put it in there. Then I have to change this. Now, one thing that I noticed this with students who are doing Java programming. Instead of typing out the same variable that you're using 10 times during your program, especially if you start getting big programs, I don't notice a lot of students doing this. What they'll do is they'll just copy the variable name and then paste it in the program. That way you never have to worry about typing it wrong. That might be a good hint for you on the test, right? So this is going to be the same as that. We know it's the same because I did a copy paste. I didn't have to type it in. So that might save you some typing, but also save you getting errors in your program because you typed it 2 different ways, which I saw a little bit of. That's all we had to do. There's just 2 changes to that program. It's still a counted loop. The only difference from the previous one is that we have we let the user tell us tell us what this number is. Instead of us setting it to 10, we let the user tell us what that number is. So otherwise it's the same. We still control it with the count. The count is set here. It's updated here. We didn't touch any of this program except the very start of it. So I've saved this as a different one called 2. We see that we've updated our flow chart to include that. And let's go, right? Let's run it and see if it will run the same as the last one. So that's a difference than the last one, right? The last one didn't say anything about how many you want to sell today, but that's what we expect. That's what we were hoping. How many items are you going to sell today? Well, we're going to say 5, just the same as this. Sale amount 1, 50, 2, 50, oops, 55, 65, 75, 85. And that should be done. Yep, there we go. The average is 66, same. So that works perfectly. That's the code. Code looks nice. We're controlling our code, our while loop with the count. The count's in the right place. All good. So last one. All we had to do, the only difference between 1 and 2 is we added this line of code and we changed this. Otherwise, everything was the same. Oh, you change its name, save it. Otherwise, it's the same. And the flow chart, the only difference that was there was I added that line of code there and changed it here. Same. So we did exactly the same change to the flow chart as we did to the program. Easy peasy. All right. So that's it. That's nice. That's now the next program is different, right? So I told you we got 2 different types of loops that we're using so far. We do counted loops and we do sentinel loops. And we've just done 2 counted loops. The first counted loop, it's set. You're going to do it 10 times. Second counted loop, oh, well, we asked the user how many times. But it's still, but as soon as the user tells us, then it's counted loop. We do it that many times. The next kind of loop is the sentinel loop. Now the sentinel loop, the user is inside the loop, and while the loop is processing, the user is able to type something that will cause them to exit the loop. There's a couple ways of doing it, but we're going to do it the easiest way. I could show you another way, but I don't want to confuse you. We'll do it. Now I say that because I've seen some students from this class and other classes have been handing me in programs with a while loop and at the end of the while loop and else. It's not wrong. You can do it that way. If I was going to do it that way, I would make the while condition true, and then I'd have an if statement at the end of the while and a break, because that way I could use the else in the way it's supposed to be used, because the else is only supposed to be used if the while statement is false. So I don't want to get into that too much. It does work, and the way the students have been handing it in, it works, but we don't need it. You know what I mean? For these little programs, we don't need that. And so I'm trying to keep things simple, right? Is that a good idea? Simple's good. But if you hand it in with while and else, or you put that on your test, I'm not going to mark it wrong. It's all right. Yeah. Because somebody has shown you that. Does that mean you got a tutor outside of class or something? I don't know. It's fine. I'm not going to do that though. Yeah, let's do it because we're going to change it, right? Oh, well, the Python's there. So the third one, we need to change it so that they only keep going as long as they don't enter a 0. So as long as the number is bigger than 0, then we stay in the loop. So what's going to control the loop? Instead of the loop being controlled by a count, the loop is going to be controlled by the number of the sales. So when the sales becomes less than 0, or less than or equal to 0, that's when we quit. As long as the sales are more than 0, so we know we got to change our condition. So it's going to keep going as long as sales are bigger than 0. Yes, sales are bigger than 0. Now I've taken that. I didn't do any sort of secondary thinking on this. This is directly from what they said. Keep requesting sales until the user enters a value of 0 or less. So we're going to keep going as long as the amount is more than 0. it will become false when they enter 0 or less. So that's why I did it that way. So it's true as long as they're doing, so that's fine. Oh, well, that Liz, so what about the count? Well, we don't need this get items anymore then, do we? Because that's not going to control it, right? So I'm going to just delete that. That's not necessary. Don't need that code anymore. So this is the difference between the 2 and the 3. The other thing is that we actually need to, control the loop with this input amount, right? We need to control the loop with the input amount. So I'm going to take this and I'm going to copy it, and I'm just going to paste it up here. Well, when I paste it, it goes there, but I will put it up here. Oh, got a problem here with running out of space. Let's see. Okay, so I need an arrow. So this is going to be the start of my program. The start of my program, I'm going to increment my variables. I'm going to set up my initial variables, which is my count and then I'm going to get the sales amount, because the sales amount is controlling the while loop. So remember, this is my theory on it anyways. Sales amount controls the while loop. So the last thing I do before I go into the while loop is get the sales amount, because it controls the while loop. That way I'm able to understand my program easier, and it'll also be easier to fix it if there's any issues with it. So sales amount controls it. So I'm going to do that sales amount there right before I go into the loop. I need another arrow, which is going to be between the two. All right, from there to there. So, but the thing is, remember my way of doing it, which I think will work better for you. This program would kind of work, but it would give us some errors, because we got the count is the last thing in the loop. What do we want to have as the last thing in the loop? The thing that controls the loop, right? What's controlling the loop? The sales amount. Now, what's also going to happen if we leave it like this is the user's going to enter a sales amount at the start of the program. Then they're going to ask them to enter the sales amount again. I mean, they're going to go, what kind of stupid program is this? And they'll be right. What kind of stupid program is that? Because that's stupid. We don't want to do stupid. So we have to move this to somewhere where it will work. So I'm going to take that sales amount from there, and I'm going to put it where it will work, which will be after the count. That means I'm going to have to remove this, because that's no longer controlling that. I have to remove that. And let's post it, print this. Oh, yeah. Okay, but now at least it's free to move. I can put it down here. This is now going to be the first thing inside the loop, just like it was the first thing before the loop, which is updating the totals. Oh, that arrow is not connected. That's what I noticed. If you don't, oh, for God's sake. I don't have the cursor control that I thought I did. So that, what I notice is when it's connected, you kind of, so it's not. Do it again, because I took the wrong end. When you connect it, you get, there we go. That's connected. Or is it? I think, there we go. Yeah, that's it. It kind of highlights, yeah, so that, oh, we got our true out of place. So still true and false. Now, so now we update the total. That's the first, another arrow in the wrong place. Yes, so now we update the total, update the count, but the count's no longer controlling the loop. The thing that's controlling the loop is the sales. So I put that as the last thing in the loop. And if it's the last thing in the loop, once it's connected up as the last thing in the loop, now it's the last thing in the loop. What do we do with the last thing in the loop? We get an arrow that goes from it back to the while, right? It's going to go back to the while. And that way our flow chart will be consistent with our, so let's do that. Let's put this back to the while. There it is. There we go. Had it there. And we're back on track. So arrow going backwards means we've got a loop. Now, we do have one little issue still remaining, and that's the possibility that the person types a number 0 for the first entry. That's possible. The program starts, the total 0, the count 0, and the person enters the sales amount of 0. Then what happens? Then we go over here to calculate the average, and it'll be 0 divided by 0, and the computer will stop because you can't do a division by 0. When I say the computer will stop, it won't stop, but it'll give you a bad error message. So we don't want that. So what we're going to do is we're going to make that not possible. And how we can make that not possible. So this is what we call error trapping, or, you know, we're avoiding errors. We're making it so that the user can't make an error. They could, you know, because users make errors. And so you might think, oh, this is just a silly little program, you know, just calculating the average of sales. If that was your business, you don't want the computer program stopping, right? You know what I mean? This is a very small example, but you don't want that. A lot of what you'll be doing if you start writing programs will be trapping errors that users could put in, because users don't know how the computer works. You know, they're going to type 0 all the time, and it's going to stop your program. So you make it so that it can't stop your program, right? It's your job as a computing person. So what we do is, what we do is we put another condition in there. Come on. I just put an arrow in, not meaning to. How about that? So maybe I need to move this out of the way so that it won't do that. Try again. Yes. So we're going to have another condition, and this time the condition is going to be, is the count. I'm actually going to check to see if the count, not is the count less than or greater than, because that's all right. You can divide by -1, but you can't divide by 0. So the exact problem is it equal to 0? If it's equal to 0, well, that's a bad thing. So if it's equal to 0, how do we get over the problem? We just don't let it do the divide. We don't let it do this thing. So we have it do something else. And so what I would do to have it do something else, and I'm running out of space here, is I'd put another little box out here, and that little box would say average takes a value of 0. That's not going to stop your computer from running. And then, so that's what we're going to do if it's 0. If it's not 0, what will happen if I type this, if I press this? Will that go with an arrow to that? Maybe it will. No. Oh yeah, this is really painful. Yeah, give me a sec. I'll try. I got to put an arrow on here. And the thing is, the arrow's got to come from there to here. Then I'm going to have another arrow, which is going to come from here to here. So all that we're doing here with this is we're making it so you wanted it to be bigger. Oh, smaller. Problem is, how am I going to fit it on the page and make it bigger? Maybe. Let's see. Bigger. It's kind of, you can see I lost the start of it that way. But is that bigger? Is that easy enough to see now? So let's look at the problem. Now, look, this is a loop. You can tell because the arrow goes back. But what about this? Is that a loop? It's not a loop, even though we got arrows that sort of go around. The reason we can tell it's not a loop is none of the arrows go backwards. All the arrows go forward, right? So this is an if statement. This is a while statement. And that's how you can tell in your flow chart. Do you have arrows going backwards? If you have arrows going backwards, you got a loop. Sorry? Very good. You're right. I need to do a true and false. So this is going to be true. If the count, oh, sorry, true is not going to go there. That's, put the true where it belongs. True belongs there. And down here is going to be, this is the false. So if it's equal to 0, we go and do that thing. If it's not equal to 0, we do that thing. And we got our true and false here too. So we're good. Okay, so as I said, be careful with this. This is not a loop. This is just an if statement that happens to be that at the end of these two statements, they both just go to this other thing, which just prints the average, right? But here's a loop. You can tell it's a loop because you got your arrow going backwards. Is that okay? Any questions? We're almost done. Almost done, because all we have to do now is make this into a Python program. And we don't have to write the program from scratch because most of this we've already got, right? We just need to change our program so it looks like our flowchart. We should be able to do that. Okay, so I'm going to go to, now how I would do it, as I say, is I got my old program. Before I make any changes to it, save as the new one. So there was problem 2. Now I'm going to save it as problem 3. Now you guys, when you do it, you're going to put your name and student number in it, right? Because otherwise I might think that you copied it from somebody. Which one do you want me to make big? This is problem 3. Oh, sorry, this is problem 2. Yeah, I can make it bigger. Well, 16, I don't know if I can make it bigger than 16, maybe. I'll try. 16 is, see if I go to 18, then, yeah, okay, I can. Ooh. What's that all about? You cannot minimize Zoom when you're recording a meeting. Yeah, oh, okay. I didn't think that I even touched Zoom. Go away. Okay, I'll end the meeting. Okay, I think we recorded enough.